Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Listen with Vobes. Here, listen up. In the studio, once again, not in my chair, getting my glowing face red. I had to pack that away last night because I had the Vobe show and various things to do. Hope you can hear me all right and everything's working. I am nursing another hot lemon and grated ginger. Ginger and lemon, or lemon and ginger, whatever you want to call it. So I'm just going to take that and shove it in there, out the way. We don't need that. So I have now dripped all over the desk. And I haven't got a cloth in here. Normally I've got a little cloth. Oh well. Just have to use my hands and my trousers. You didn't see that. You didn't see that. Anyway, I hope you're all well and doing good things. Let's have a slurp of this. Oh, that's lovely, that is. That's lovely. And we'll say a quick few hellos to a few people, making sure everything's all right. No fire today, yes. Well, I got my jacket on. Today. It's a lot less colder. It's a lot less cold. Yeah, it's warmer, in other words. That's right. Lovely to see the lovely Julia out there, Turbo Stream, Billabong O'Neill, Justine Jones, Philip Hammond and Mary. Good to see you. Who else have we got there? Ed Loud, Steve G, Dudley Sawyer, Ben Reeve, Audrey Forbes, Sean Lee, and Michael White, Andrew Norris, Fresh Ginger and Lemon and Honey. I haven't put any honey. I haven't got any honey, actually. I don't need the sweetness, to be honest with you. I'm trying to keep to a less sugar-free diet. I know honey is probably very good for you because it's got natural ingredients from the flowers and things, but I certainly haven't got any local honey. But I quite like a sharp, bitter drink. I like a bitter drink, don't you? It's always nice to have a bitter drink, but then I like a lot of drink too. Not alcoholic drink, you understand. We're reading, of course, Children of the Archbishop, which seems to be going down very well, and I'm very pleased. Thank you very much for everybody who's enjoying that. Hope the migraine has gone. Turbo, have you had a migraine? I've had a sort of headache. Very light, no, not an annoying one, not one that's been enough to go, oh, where's the paracetamol? Had this for about 3 days now. I had a feeling it might be the propane gas because the nodule, because I've got a little propane gas thing cylinder here, and I thought, oh, hang on, that's not quite fully tightened. So I thought maybe it was the gas in there, but that was a couple of days ago. It's still just lingering. I don't know whether it's the change in the atmospheric pressures and things, but otherwise I feel perfectly fine. But it's not, it's like it's just niggling, but not enough to make you clamp your head, and it goes. And then it's only when I'm thinking, oh, actually, bit of a headache there. Always slightly worried about headaches because Billy had a headache that developed into something rather nasty and he nearly died. But anyway, we are on chapter 33. So, it starts with Mr. Pavarius. Mr. Pavarius's dream girl had replied at last, and as soon as Mr. Pavarius saw the mauve envelope with the decal edges. Decal? What's a decal edge? I like that. With the decal edges and the name Captain Algernon Fitzwinter on the front, his heart turned over. Oh, yes, because he is Captain Algernon Fitzwinter. I forgot that. I suddenly thought, well, who the hell's that? But this is one of his nom de plumes, isn't it? Because of the exquisiteness of the moment, the sudden relief after the suspense of wondering whether she was going to reply at all, Mr. Pavarius did not open the letter immediately. Paying his 3-penny collection fee and buying a 9-penny cigar with the change, he passed up Charlotte Street in search of a quiet public house. And then, when he had found what he wanted and had lit his cigar and then taken the first sip of the brandy and soda that he had just ordered, then, and only then, did he open the letter and begin to read. Decal is a symbol, says Michael White. A wavy edge, slightly frilled looking, says Lee. Oh, decal. Oh, right, okay, decal. Yes, of course, you have to you have to send it to me hypernetically, phonically, hypernetically, phonically, because I can't read a word. Of course, decal. Can't look up to check its meaning at the moment. Decal. And what did I say? Decal. Well, it read decal to me. Where is it? I've lost it in the text now. Wait, we want to get on to what she says. But where is it? It's brand. Wait a minute. I open. The moment. Oh yes. It is spelt. It is spelt D-E-C-K-L-E. I would have said that's Decal, like Jekyll, but you know. Anyway. And the shock, so here we go. And the shock of what he saw made him very nearly upset the table, the glass, and everything. Dear Fairy Prince, the letter started. Fairy Prince? They were the very words that had once occurred to him while he was standing in the doorway of a newsagent's. It showed an affinity of taste beyond all imagining, and from the way it went on he could see that with Desiree he had simply been banging his head up against a brick wall. I was thrilled by your wonderful letter, the letter ran. You cannot imagine how I dreaded opening something from a man whom I have never seen, but I could tell at once from the handwriting that you were someone good, whom I could trust. How extraordinary, Mr. Bavarius reflected. That was my disguised handwriting. In the ordinary way, it's quite different. But it will still be on an ordeal meeting. You for the first time. You will forgive me if I'm frightened. Remember, it is my life you are playing with, if you are playing. If I were older, perhaps I would not mind so much, but you must know how defenceless I feel. So please, even if you don't like me, be kind and gentle when we meet, or I shall run away. Would 3 p.m. on Sunday next, 27th Cannon Street, waiting room, first class, be convenient? You will know me at once, because I never wear anything but lilies of the valley. Never wear anything but lilies of the valley. No, of course. She couldn't mean that. But already his eyes had strayed for the last time. To the last line, rather. Your beggar girl, was what he read. Your beggar girl. I suppose beggar girl because she had put a thing in the advert and she was begging for men to make her acquaintance. I don't know. Anyway, how extraordinary. A decal edge. You see, that's not how he spelled Audrey Forbes. That's not how he has spelt it. He has spelt it differently. He has spelt it decal. That's why I read it that way. But anyway, whatever. Decals to me are those stickers that you try and put on Airfix models, but intend to end up stuck to me instead. I think it's pronounced decal the way you said it, Richard, says Lee Lawson. It is pronounced as, it is spelt. We're having an argument now. We're having an argument. D-E-C-K-L-E. I am sure that Norman Collins, what's his name? Norman Collins, yeah, thank you. I'm sure he knows how to spell decal. Not dettel. It's not dettel. It's not the edges of dettel. Imagine sniffing. This is dettel. Very clean. Good in this day and age with COVID everywhere, but back then, of course, slightly different. Anyway, Sunday. Mr. Bavarius should have remembered that it was the very hardest day of all on which to get away from the Archbishop Bodkin Hospital. By rights, he should have been accompanying the entire choir, the boys on one side, the girls on the other, in chant and sacred song, at the precise moment when he was to keep his romantic assignation in the first-class waiting room. And, in the end, it was nothing less than a forged telegram Mr. Bavarius carefully kept his thumb over the office of origin when showing it to Dr. Trump, reading, "Cathedral organist, gravely indisposed, can we rely upon you for afternoon mission service and full choral evensong? Best regards." Signed, Exeter. And that settled the matter. Directly after breakfast, therefore, Mr. Bavarius was already on his way out through the front gates, on his way round to Deirdre Gardens to get changed into his courting clothes. He had given some thought to the costume, had indeed spent whole singing periods with the class all round him, yelling their heads off, pondering over what a retired Indian Army officer would wear in this climate. Finally, after a visit to a gentleman's outfitter's at the back of Covent Garden, he had chosen a blue double-breasted blazer with plain brass buttons, rather lightish flannel trousers, and a pair of brown and white half-brogues. Dressing in Deirdre Gardens was easy. Within 20 minutes he had changed completely, and, with a quick word of explanation to the Miss Lewises that he was off to Oxford for an old students' collegiate garden party, he was on his way. It was still early. There was a good 2 hours before the appointment, and he decided to take a bite of lunch on the way. I'm sorry, I can't help feeling... You just can't help feeling disaster is about to happen. It's just the way Norman Collins sets these things up. Isn't it? You just can't help feeling, no matter what some of these characters do. You know, it's just that thing. There's no rush. There's 2 hours. You think, oh yes, there's 2 hours for disaster. Sorry, it's the anticipation. I think that's very good. That's very good in an author. It gives you that, oh my God, what's going to happen next? I hope I'm not disappointed having said all that. Anyway. Yes, so he decided to take a bit of lunch on the way, but his lunch came as an entire disappointment to him. His nerves were too much on edge for him to be able to eat anything. Drink, yes. Food, definitely no. By 2:15, he was out on the pavement again, having drunk 2 martinis, a large Pimm's, and a brandy, with only half a roll, a sardine, and one side of a sole meuniere, some French word there, whatever that is, to absorb the lot of it. Anyone know what a sole, S-O-L-E, meuniere, M-E-U-N-I-E-R-E, with a grave over the E? No idea what that is. To absorb it. I'm guessing that's... Is that a fish? Sole meuniere? Something like that? It was at that moment that he remembered his buttonhole. A red rose, he'd said. It was to be the symbol by which she would know him. And, as he made his way towards Piccadilly Circus, he kept repeating to himself, "The red rose stands for passion, and the white rose stands for love. Oh, the red rose is a falcon, and the white rose is a dove." But as soon as he'd passed down Great Windmill Street into Shaftesbury Avenue, he realised something was wrong. There were 3 separate flower sellers, and he could have had his choice of scarlet roses, pink roses, white roses, even saffron yellow tea roses. But there was not a dark red rose among the lot of them. Evidently, the passionate had been out and doing their shopping early. He ran one dark rose to earth in the end on the steps of the National Gallery, and the old lady who was in charge of it let him have it for 9p. It was not much of a bloom, rather blackened at the edges of the petals, and with the pin thrust through its heart to prevent complete collapse. But he had passed the stage of being fussy. It was recognisably a dark rose, and it would just have to do. It was 4:40 already, and Mr. Pavarius was in a fever of anxiety, lest that he should be late. Here we go. Michael White says it's a dish using a fish place. Using the fish place. Oh, the fish place. Yes, got you. Sorry, not a fish. Not a place at the table for a fish. Hello, fish. How are you? Having a sole mangiarani, are you? Nice. Have a martini with it. Oh, dear. I do enjoy this book. Anyway, I will have to read London Belongs to Me to you at some stage. That will be a hoot. I love that book. Anyway, where are we? He was in a fever, least he should be. Cannon Street, 3 o'clock, he'd said to the taxi driver. I'll make it 5 shillings if you can get me there. Not that it was difficult. There was no traffic in the city on Sundays, and Cannon Street was nearer to Charing Cross than he'd realised. There was 6 minutes to spare when he arrived, and in the circumstances it seemed silly to pay 5 shillings for 1 3 tip. He compromised in the end on ½ a crown and entered the station so quickly that the taxi driver's abuse was wasted on the station yard. Indeed, the single word bandit was all that Mr. Pavarius could catch. Once inside the main hall, Mr. Pavarius carefully slackened his pace. The moment, the supreme moment, had come. He might even be under observation already. He must appear dignified, soldierly, even nonchalant. The very last thing that he wanted was to be seen bounding in like some hot pan bursting from the bushes. But as it turned out, it was quite all right. He had the first-class waiting room entirely to himself. Sitting down in the far corner, he removed his new white Panama, placed it on the knob of his ebony cane with his yellow gloves in the dent down the middle, pulled up his lavender silk socks, and waited. By 3 o'clock, he was still waiting, and by 5 past, and 10 past, and 1/4 past, by now he was so nervous, so anguished by the suspense, that he inevitably pulled one of the gilt buttons clean off the blazer simply through fiddling with it. I've been had, he told himself. She isn't coming. It was a put-up job, a hoax. There may even be blackmail in it. And then, through the plate glass panel of the door, just below the frosting and above a poster of brilliantly sun-drenched Cliftonville, he caught a narrow glimpse of a female bosom, supporting an outsized bunch of lilies of the valley. At the sight, all self-control went from him, and he sprang up. Then the door opened, and there stood Desiree, confronting him. Dope. Oh, God, the typist woman from his agent. That's the end of that chapter, I'm afraid. Chapter 34. Oh, it's all good stuff, this, isn't it? I mean, it is a farce, really. It is a farce. Norman Collins was quite head up in entertainment at television. On Thames, not on ITV television, or whatever it was back then. Yeah. So I suppose he's quite used to farce and things. Sort of like a sitcom, isn't it, really? Anyway, chapter 34. The Founder's Tower had been a reproach to Dr. Trump ever since he'd been there. It was now nearly 7 years since he had promised himself that he would reopen it. And of course, in the meantime, the structure hadn't been improving. £220 was what the builders now wanted in order to put the upper balcony into proper repair. And it had required all Dr. Trump's eloquence to get the board even to consider it. But all that was over now, and at practically any moment the scaffolding would begin going up. Sorry, I'm going to put my phone on silent because it's beginning to annoy me now. I don't know why. I'm getting all the Facebook notifications. I thought I'd turn those off, but somehow they've been turned back on again. We need a cast list, says Lee Lawson. I wish I could remember all the characters are. Are you not paying attention, Lee? Are you not paying attention? Mr. Pavarius is a teacher. Well, he's one of the. He composes music, but he's the music teacher, isn't he? The organist at the Archbishop Bodkin Hospital, and he's one of the slackest of the people, like Mr. Dawlish, and he's been going off on the side composing music, and the agent, whose name I've forgotten now, Jack Spratt or somebody, wasn't it? His secretary was Desiree, who he had a bit of a fling with, who then dumped him because he was silly or something like that. Complete with drawings of them. That's what we need. Yes, somebody could draw the characters. It would be hilarious. Dr. Trump is the warden of the Archbishop Bodkin Hospital. And he's the one who has a nasally voice. Who would play I did think, who would play Dr. Trump? Who would you cast if you were casting it? There's lots of... not Alistair Sim. I think Alistair Sim would be great as a character in there, but I think he'd be too... He wouldn't be... who would... I don't know. Off the top of my head, I don't know. Rich will be asking questions later. Yes, that's right. I will. Anyway, let's go on. Apart from the tower, there was only one other notable event during the course of the whole year, and that was Canon Mallow's illness. Considering that it all took place more than 100 miles away, Canon Mallow was now living at Sea View on the Isle of Wight, it caused an extraordinary commotion. It was all Canon Mallow's fault too. That much was agreed on both sides. A walk along the front without overcoat or muffler on a day when sensible people were wrapped up against the local breeze that came round the corner by Bembridge, and there Canon Mallow was, flat on his back, with pneumonia, and the local doctor talking grimly about inadequate nursing in readiness for the impending crisis. It was the adequate nursing that did it. Oh, sorry. The doctor had been talking grimly about adequate nursing, not inadequate. That was me adding something. Only because they were talking about it on the radio, about inadequate nursing and stuff, weren't they? About these days. Anyway, it was the adequate nursing that did it. His landlady said flatly that it was something entirely beyond her powers, and that it would be impossible to house a trained nurse as well as Canon Mallow. Not that that was entirely true. The season had not yet started. It was only March, remember, and the first floor front was entirely empty. No, it was not possible, but undesirable. For among the delicate adjusted values that determine the fortunes of seaside boarding houses, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that sends things crashing faster than a death on the premises. I love this period in history because they talk about, the first floor front as a reference to, rooms that people used to hire out. I mean, obviously people have lodgers now and they rent flats, but the language is so different today. And of course the standards are so different, which is, who's Jason Watkins? Justine Jones. Just Jason Watkins. I'm going to have to look at that. Hang on a minute. Sorry, slight diversion. We used to do diversion. Do you remember when we used to do diversions? I don't know who he is, but I might recognise him. Jason Watkins. Is he a modern? You can't have modern actors. I'm sorry. these have to be actors of that period. We definitely want people of that period. Kenneth Williams. Oh no, Kenneth Williams. I'm not quite sure. Kenneth Williams. Oh no, he's not making him out. He'd be too funny. Yes, that would be good. Watkins. Jason Watkins. Never heard of him. Oh, there's a picture of him there. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, hang on. Pictures. Oh, yes, I know who you mean now. Yes, he looks a nervy sort of bloke there, doesn't he? Jason Watkins. I can't think what I've seen him in. But yeah, he could be. I don't... I'm just trying to remember. I was thinking very much of people who are... Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, that's right. I know where I've seen him. He was in NW 12 or whatever it was called. The piss take of the BBC, wasn't he? Do you remember that? I did see that on iPlayer when I did have iPlayer. That was a couple of years ago now. Shirley Temple for sweet Shirley Temple. Could have Hayley Mills. Hayley Mills, probably... No, not quite right. Not quite right. Probably have to have an unknown, wouldn't you, for Sweetie? Anyway. Sorry about that little diversion. Yes, I thought I'd recognise him, and I couldn't place him. But he used to be in that BBC thing, wasn't he? NW... What was it called? NW2? NW12? NW something or other? He's still alive, if that helps. Yes, thanks. Yes. I was thinking of 19... Yes, that's the trouble. And yes, he would be indeed good. He plays controversial characters well. Anyway, so, yes, apart from that, Canon Mallow. He'd be an interesting one to cast, wouldn't he? Right, so... So Canon Mallow, bundled up in a large cocoon of blankets, left the boarding house and travelled by ambulance as far as Crevedale Nursing Home at Ryde. By the time he arrived, he was ill. Very ill. The doctor prescribed sleeping tablets, but Canon Mallow refused to take them until he had written a letter. And then, when he found out that he was too weak to write himself, he allowed one of the nurses to write it for him. The nurse, who had expected something rather more dramatic, an appeal, for example, for an only living relative to come at once to his bedside immediately, was openly disappointed. For what Canon Mallow dictated was as follows. Dear Dr. Trump, in case you should need me suddenly... The idea that the hospital might find that it could not get along without him was something that was constantly in his mind. I am dropping you this little line to say that because of a congestion in my chest, I am moving to the above nursing home. The doctor thinks that I shall be here for about a month. After that, I shall go to a convalescence home somewhere. I hope that Mrs. Trump and yourself are both well. Please give my regards to the staff and ask them to remember me to any of the children that still know me, particularly Sweetie and Ginger. With kind regards, yours sincerely, Edward Mallow. He was able to manage the signature himself, and when satisfied, as though it was something really important that he had achieved, he took his sleeping tablets and dozed off. Dr. Trump was rather annoyed than gratified. Was annoyed rather than gratified by receiving the letter. It was the extreme unnecessariness that displeased him. How, in any circumstances, could the Bodkin Hospital possibly require Canon Mallow suddenly? And the reference to Sweetie and Ginger, it coupled their names together in a way that he disapproved of most strongly. He would certainly not pass on that bit. It was Miss Prinine, who carefully read all the letters before filing them, who passed the news of Canon Mallow's illness round the hospital, and the effect was remarkable. Everyone, that is, the older ones, the pre-Trump era appointments, promptly wrote to him, And Mr. Dawlish, dirty, unsentimental Mr. Dawlish, decided to start a small subscription list, a mere bob-a-piece affair, so that the staff could send a small token, a basket of fruit or a book or two, for when he felt like reading again. In the end, £1.16 was collected, and Mr. Pavarius made the diplomatic error of asking Dr. Trump if he would like to subscribe. Like to? The answer to that was obviously no, but how could he refuse? It would look mean, grudging, even possibly unchristian. So reluctantly, Dr. Trump forked out his bob along with the rest of them. Then, on the very day that Mr. Dawlish was wasting Miss Dr. Trump's time showing him what he had bought with the money, a folding bedside table with adjustable flap, Miss Prynne showed herself at her most tactless. She had written to Mrs. Gurnet, and she said, and Miss Gurnet was proposing to go down to the Isle of Wight herself. Dr. Trump could hardly believe his ears. The waste of time, the money squandered on the fair, the busybody nature of the whole expedition. For some reason, the whole incident rankled deeply. He realised now that he resented Captain Canon Mallow. Oh my goodness. What I absolutely love about Norman Collins's work is just the throwaway detail that he throws in. So there they saved up this present, right? But it's like it's like the sort of the detail that makes you almost, it's just so bizarre really, but so of its time. A folding bedside table with an adjustable flap. I just find those things, instead of like a folding table, but it's a folding bedside table with an adjustable flap. With an adjustable flap. I just love it. What have we got here? Canon Mallow. John Robinson Hare. I don't know who that is. Robinson Hare as Canon Mallow. Stanley Bax. Robinson, not James Robinson Justice. John Robertson. Who the hell is that? Hang on. I've got to have a look now. You see, I'm out of... If this is a modern actor, I'm well out. Robertson. What did you say what name was? John Robertson. Robert. Oh, here it is. Hang on. I've got footballers. Is that you're not thinking of these, are you? Which one is he? Have I spelt this right? John Robertson. John Robertson. Oh, Hare. You put Hare. Oh, right. Oh, here we go. Robertson Hare. Oh, yeah. With his little round glasses. He looks a cheeky little fella, doesn't he? Look, there's Derek Nimmo. See, I could see Derek Nimmo. Derek Nimmo would be good, wouldn't he? Derek Nimmo would be great as Mr. Dawlish. Sort of, Mr. Dawlish is the one that just sort of loiters about with a cigarette. And not Mr. Pavarius, but Mr. Dawlish, dirty Mr. Dawlish, just sort of seems affable. Just an affable, whereas Derek Nimmo is just sort of affable, sort of, oh, yes, I've said, very good. Yeah, what we need is a classic comedy cast from the old days, and then we'll have to do that, won't we? We'll have to pick out, your Margaret Rutherfords, your Alistair Sims, your A-list, and then your B-list. How about that? Yeah, that would be good. and then we could Oh Calamity. Thinking of Just William, Martin Jarvis and Bonnie Langford. Oh, yes. I had Rife Robertson in my head, says Turbo Stream. All gas and gaiters. Stanley Baxter as Mr. Pervarious. Oh, yes, Stanley Baxter would be good for Mr. Pervarious. Yes, absolutely. Because he could live that double life, couldn't he? That would be good. Right. So let's crack on. Hang on, I've lost my thing. Right. The abduction of Canon Mallow, for that's what it amounted to, was carried out swiftly and efficiently. Less than 24 hours after Mrs. Gurnett had arrived in Rye, Canon Mallow, wrapped up like a mummy in a thick fleecy blanket, was transported northwards at heaven knows what expense in a private ambulance. It was a long journey from Ryde to Bedford, and Canon Mallow slept most of the way of it. Because of his high temperature, he was still somewhere away up above 100. He could not think very clearly. He was, indeed, rather confused by the whole occurrence. Crevedale had seemed very nice to him, even though they had been a bit slow whenever he rang the bell for anything. But he didn't question that Mrs. Gurnett was right. In his experience, she had always been right about everything. And it was so nice of her to take the trouble, with all those children on her hands. But no, wait, he was forgetting. She wasn't at Bodkin Hospital any longer. She was... Oh, what was she doing? He couldn't quite remember, but whatever it was, he was still sure that she was right. It was late. Really late. Getting on for midnight when they reached Bedford and drew up before the Lamorna nursing establishment in Bunyan Gardens. But everything was exactly as Mrs. Gurnett had directed. The light over the porch was burning, and the night sister opened the front door as the ambulance came to a rest. Number 1, the big room with the bow window, had the gas fire on in readiness, and the bed was positively padded with hot water bottles. Fresh water stood in the carafe on the bedside table, and there was a large screen at the foot of the bed so that the window could be wide open without so much as a first flicker of a draught. Mrs. Gurnett insisted on doing most of the settling in herself, and as the night sister noticed that she never had seen this large, rather grim-looking woman so gentle and solicitous, when after tucking up the time came to switch the light off, leaving only the night light burn it. Mrs. Gurnett, sorry, scrolling my words into one there. When after tucking up the time came to switch off the light, leaving only the night light burning, Mrs. Gurnett stood there for a moment, smiling down on him. Then, tired as she was, she said something that surprised the night sister. "If he needs anything, send for me," were the words she uttered. And she meant them. She was, in fact, conscious of one thing and one thing only. She had got back under her own roof the nicest gentleman she had ever known. Oh. Chapter 35. Oh yes, Barbara Windsor, young Barbara Windsor as Desiree would be hilarious. Would Terry Thomas fit in? I say, absolute shower. Do you think what the deuce is? Yes, Terry Thomas. Where would Terry Thomas? What character would Terry Thomas be? I'm not sure. I immediately see him as any of the immediate staff. There's nobody sort of. Good gracious, you cad! You really mean that? Chapter 35. The event that shook Dr. Trump's life was The event that shook Dr. Trump's life was sudden and unanticipated. It came with a fierce and dreadful emphasis that left him stunned, resentful, and rebellious. There seemed something so entirely unnecessary in this disturbance of the pattern that he had designed for himself. There was not even any accounting for it. The weather was warmer, considerably warmer than it had been when Canon Mallow had caught his careless, vexing chill, and in comparison with Canon Mallow, who was moving appreciably towards the shadows, Bishop Warple was in the very prime, the mere mid-afternoon of life. A suffragan bishop today, who knows what tomorrow might have held in store. A suffragan. What does that mean, suffragan? A suffragan bishop today, who knows what tomorrow might have held in store. And now, nothing. A yawning, horrid blank, simply because the clay at Highgate Cemetery had been damp after another interment, and Bishop Warple, Bishop Warple had stood on a... Sorry, I've lost my ability to read. I've lost my ability to read. Let me just take a breath here. I don't understand what's going on. So we're just going to reverse. Was it Sergeant Chiswick? Can anyone remember which of the characters pricked the baby up Sweetie from the door? Yeah, Sergeant Chiswick did that. Sergeant Chiswick, right at the very beginning, he brought him in because he was on the... Sergeant Chiswick's sort of like the night watch gentleman, isn't he? He's like the caretaker type thing. I'm just going to read this chapter again because... not this chapter, but that paragraph or two, because I kind of wasn't really paying attention. The event that shook Dr. Trump's life was sudden and unanticipated. It came with a fierce and dreadful emphasis that left him stunned, resentful and rebellious. There seemed something so entirely unnecessary in this disturbance of the pattern that he had designed for himself. There was not even any accounting for it. The weather was warmer, considerably warmer than it had been when Canon Mallow had caught his careless, vexing chill, and, in comparison with Canon Mallow, who was now moving appreciably towards the shadows, Bishop Warple was in the very prime, the mere mid-afternoon of life. A suffragan bishop today, who knows what tomorrow might have held in store. And now... nothing. A yawning, horrid blank, simply because the clay at Highgate Cemetery had been damp after another interment, and Bishop Warple had stood about on it for too long, burying a lay preacher. On the following morning, he was snuffy, and continued with his duties. The day after that, he retired to bed, and 48 hours later, a mere 4 days after the first funeral, Dr. Trump was sitting again in the chintzy drawing-room where Felicity had proposed to him, only this time the curtains were drawn, and it was not Felicity, but a solicitor who was sitting there beside him. Oh, a suffragan bishop is appointed to help a diocese bishop. Ah, right. Oh, okay. Even on Friday, it had still seemed nothing, this ailment of the bishop's, a sort of summer cold with a general lassitude and marked irritability. Dr. Trump had, indeed, spent from 7:30 p.m. until 10 on Friday evening alone with the bishop, and so lightly had he regarded the whole matter that he had taken the invalid nothing, not even a grape or a bunch of flowers. And apart from his querulousness, Bishop Warple had seemed lively enough. Altogether it had been a pleasant, rather lazy sort of evening. At 10 o'clock, when Dr. Trump announced that he must be going, he left the bishop sitting comfortably in his chair. He was just going to glance through this week's popular cycling, he said, and then toddle off to bed. There was nothing in the least surprising about his choice of reading. Indeed, it was reassuringly normal. A keen amateur cyclist in his undergraduate days, Bishop Warple had maintained a lively interest in the subject. He had read himself to sleep every Friday, the day on which Popular Cycling appeared, with details of patent spring handlebars and built-in hub dynamos and other refinements that had come in since his time. It was 10 o'clock when Dr. Trump left him, and at 3 in the morning, a mere 5 hours later, the phone rang and Dr. Trump found a hysterical Mrs. Warple on the other end of it. A bedroom telephone extension was something that, on principle, Dr. Trump did not allow for himself, but tonight, as Dr. Trump, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes, found himself stumbling down the stairs barefoot, in his agitation he had accidentally kicked... Sorry, this is one of these. But tonight, as Dr. Trump, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes, found himself stumbling down the stairs barefoot, in his agitation he'd accidentally kicked the bedroom slippers too far under the bed to be able to recover them, he envied people who had merely had to thrust an arm out of the warm bedclothes, and the chill of the ornament tiling in the hall was so intense that he could not concentrate properly. "Yes, yes," he said, shifting from one icy foot to the other. "What is it? Dr. Trump here. Who wants him?" He paused while the telephone crackled back at him. "Mrs. Warpole," he said in astonishment. "Your mother, dear?" The voice at the other end was so agitated and confused that he couldn't follow it. The bishop? Yes, he said at last. "You say he's thinking? At this time of night? But surely he must be thinking something. What exactly is he thinking about?" Dr. Trump removed the receiver 6 inches from his ear because Mrs. Warple was speaking no longer. She was screaming at him. And then the awful truth came to him. The word was sinking, and his spine went cold as his feet when he realised the significance of it. Then, promptly, his manliness, his sense of authority asserted itself. I will be round immediately," he said. "Stay where you are. Fetch a doctor. Don't move. Keep calm. I'm just leaving." And with that word sinking tattooed upon his mind, Dr. Trump ran back upstairs to tell Felicity. But already it was too late. All that was eternal in Bishop Warple had departed from them. He lay there motionless on his bed, not even having stirred from his last sleep. His day's correspondence and his Bible were beside him, and over on the dressing table stood a copy of Popular Cycling with the article on spring forks, pathetically turned down for future reference. As Dr. Trump stood there gazing down on him, he was disappointed in himself, even shocked. Irresistibly his thoughts rushed pell-mell to the black future. With Bishop Warple gone, there would be no more of those little Lambeth luncheon parties, personal invitations. Personal introductions count for so much with busy people like prelates, and Bishop Warple had been wonderfully good at pushing his son-in-law, and now... But how truly disgraceful to be guilty of thoughts like that when he should have been at prayer. It was downright appalling. Going down on his knees, Dr. Trump asked for forgiveness. He was sincere, contrite, fervent. But his prayers were still all about himself. "O Lord, drive all vain ambitions from me," he began in a torrent rush of emotion. "Chasten my mind and subdue it. Cleanse me of self-interest and purge me of unworthy thoughts. Make me meek. Make me humble." We are just about to start chapter 36, but as it's so close, and I don't think we'll get... Oh, I don't know, we might just manage this. We might manage it, because only a couple of pages. Shall we? Is it worth going? Is it worth going? You were wonderfully suffragette bishop today. You get a one. Do you get a wonderful one? Because it's only just gone 1:45, hasn't it? Now let's wing it. See if we can get one more couple of pages. Sweetie was 11 now, a ripe age, the age for serious decisions, as Dr. Trump had just reminded her. She was standing on one side of his desk on the small square of red carpet, and he was seated on the other. And because she was so short, she was at a disadvantage. Whenever Dr. Trump leaned back, he disappeared from sight altogether, cut off from her by the top of the little rack in which he kept his notepaper and his urgent labels. But every time he leant forward, he was near, frighteningly near, and his eyes were too close together. It was like a folded-up pair of scissors looking at her. He was ugly, Sweetie decided. So ugly, in fact, that she was sorry for him. Very sorry. It must be dreadful, she thought, having to go about life looking like that. And dreadful, too, always so cross. He didn't look as though he'd been happy once in all of his life. Half the time he was furious about something or other. He was furious at this very moment, really furious, and all because of things that other people had said about her. The report lay there on the desk in front of him, propped up against the blotter so that he could glance at it quickly again if he felt his anger beginning to subside. And the bits that he had read out to her didn't seem too bad. They were true, too, most of them. She was very sensible. Sweetie hadn't realised, in fact, that other people knew so much about her. Arithmetic, poor, does not try, Dr. Trump was reading out loud for the second time. English, backward, cannot spell. History, fair, does not remember dates. Geography, poor, does not concentrate. Music, a pretty singing voice. Here Dr. Trump paused. The rest of the line read, excellent, altogether rather charming melody maker. It was Mr. Pervarious who reported on singing, and Mr. Pervarious' choice of words nauseated Dr. Trump. Then his eyes focused farther down the sheet, and he began reading aloud once more. Scripture, fair, doesn't seem interested. Needlework, disappointed, cannot sew buttonholes. Cookery, poor, careless on the practical side. Physical training, good, easy posture. Conduct, fair, unintentionally impertinent. The bit about physical training had slipped out as he was reading, but he managed in time to introduce a quick note of contempt into his voice as he uttered it. Then he sat back and folded his hands in front of him. Not interested in Scripture, he repeated. Are you aware what those words imply? You, a pupil of the Archbishop Bodkin Hospital, and you have the impertinence to not be interested in the Holy Scriptures? I'm sorry, sir. You will be more than sorry. You should be more than sorry, Dr. Trump snapped back at her. You should be ashamed. And more than ashamed, you should be contrite. Are you contrite? Sweetie nodded her head. It was safer than answering, because she didn't know what the word meant. But she gave a little quick sniff and nodded, just so that Dr. Trump would know that she was ready to cry if he wanted her to do so. Once she had really started to cry, she knew that it would all be over, and then she could get back to the classroom again. Dr. Trump never kept any of the girls very long once they were crying. But he evidently did not mean for her to cry yet, because he was still repeating bits out of the report. Backward, fair, poor, fair, disappointing, poor, he was saying. Do you realise that in 3 years' time you will have to earn a living in the world? Yes, sir, Sweetie answered. There was no conviction in her voice, however, because she didn't really know how people did earn their living. It was one of those things that nobody had ever told her. And then Dr. Trump settled the problem for her. All our girls get situations, unless they are bad girls, Dr. Trump told her. But no one wants to take an idle, careless, clumsy creature. Who do you imagine... Here Dr. Trump flipped the report contemptuously with the back of his fingernails. Would take a girl with nothing in her favour except easy posture and a pretty singing voice. Sweetie could not imagine, so she remained silent. "Answer me," Dr. Trump insisted. Then she saw that what he was driving at, and was grateful to him. It made everything so simple. "Why, the man who's going to marry me," she replied. But from the expression on Dr. Trump's face, Sweetie realised that she must have been mistaken. All that he said was, "Pah!" Already, however, Dr. Trump was speaking again, and that took her mind off things. Do you know what I should do if I were... Do you know what I should do if I were to do my duty?" he suddenly asked. "No, sir," Sweetie answered him, truthfully. It was a surprising sort of question, because until he had asked it, she had imagined that Dr. Trump always did what was his duty. "I should turn you out onto the streets," he told her. "Turn you out so that you waste no more of the money that is being spent on you." That startled her. The prospect was both fascinating and alarming. Apart from the Sunday afternoon crocodile and the regular nature walks, she had never been outside the hospital in her entire life. Not once since she had come there, and certainly not alone. It seemed a drastic sort of treatment for not being able to remember dates and sew buttonholes. But what could she do? What would she do? What would she do at night time, for instance? But apparently it was all a false alarm, for Dr. Trump was addressing her again. "I shall not, however, turn you out," he went on. "I shall ask you to be kept here. I shall ask for you to be observed. From now on, someone will be watching you, always. At monthly intervals, I shall ask for a report. If that report..." Dr. Trump had closed his eyes for a moment while he was speaking. It was a habit of his while he was collecting his thoughts and arranging them. But when he reopened his eyes, he was amazed to find that Sweetie was no longer attending. She was peering fixedly out of the window, her face puckered up with intensity of a stare. "Are you listening to me?" he demanded. Yes, sir." "What was I saying?" About a report, sir." "Then why are you looking out of the window?" There's a bee, sir." "A what?" "A bee, sir. It just got in. It's got shut in." "We'll soon see about that." Dr. Trump got up hurriedly and snatched hold of the massive brass-knobbed blotter that stood upon his desk. What made it all so simple was that the bee was now stationary. It was blankly and angrily contemplating the bright sunny world from which it was cut off by this mysterious transparent barrier, and Dr. Trump's blotter landed right on top of it. When the blotter came away, there was no bee, only a bright smear upon the window pane. "There," said Dr. Trump triumphantly, but he could scarcely believe his eyes. "You beast," Sweetie said to him. "I wouldn't have told you if I had known." "Oh, I wouldn't have told you if I'd have known that you were going to do that." Just one more tiny bit before 5 o'clock. And Dr. Trump was not by any means satisfied when he received Sweetie's letter of apology for her rudeness. "I am sorry I was rude," it ran. "I was bad to call you a beast. I am sorry. I must not shout at old people. Shouting at old people is rude. I am sorry. I did not know you hated bees. I should have knowed. I am sorry." He dropped the sheet of notepaper into the waste paper basket. Really, it was heartbreaking, simply heartbreaking, the ignorance and stupidity of the child. He didn't hate bees. On the contrary, he rather liked them. And he was not old. The phrasing, the handwriting, and the spelling of Sweetie's letter all depressed him equally. He rose and began walking up and down the room. "Really, it's maddening," he told himself. "Sweetie and that boy Ginger are more trouble than the rest of the hospital put together. They'll be the end of me, these two." And though he did not actually utter the words, there was an authentic note of despair, of prophecy almost about them. And there we must leave it. Wow, how about that? What an exciting and jolly book. There's still plenty to go. There we are. Look, we've just got that last bit. So we're nearly up to 2/3. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. It's coming up to 5 o'clock. We got that all in. How brilliant. Glad to hear that, Turbo. Yes, Audrey was tough, and apparently at one point, it was distracted by good news about a friend in hospital. She's off the ventilator, thank goodness. Oh, marvellous. Great reading as always. Superb as suffrage. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining me on another reading. We'll be back again tomorrow. The last of this week will be tomorrow, and we will get through all of that. And no Vogue show tonight. Hey! I'm going to make some bread. I'm going to make some bread with my new flour. Crunchy flour, it's called, or something like that. It's a brown flour. So wish me luck with that. I hope it's going to rise. But first of all, got to light the Essie. So, blessy. Nice to see you. Have a nice afternoony. And I will catch up with you anony. Anony nonny noo. My friend died last Thursday. Didn't even get as far as a ventilator. Glad to have the distraction of these readings, says Lee Lawson. Excellent. Well, I do my best to keep you distracted. I'm sorry about your friend. Thoroughly enjoyed it again. Thank you, Richard. Brilliantly read. Thank you, Ed. Some bits I just lose myself in, which is great. And then I suddenly get a bit. The text jumps and it's awful. But there we go. Anyway, nice to see you. Catch up with you tomorrow. Till then, bye bye. Take care. Bye bye.